Can $3 buy one pill? The little girl's voice was so small that the pharmacist almost missed it. Almost. The old man behind the counter glanced up, annoyed, ready to wave her away, until she carefully unfolded a rain-soaked prescription and slid it across the counter with both hands. Behind her, a man in a charcoal suit froze for a fraction of a second when he saw the name written at the top. He didn't know the child. He didn't know her mother. But something about that piece of paper made an old wound inside him stir. Neither of them realized that before the night was over, a single prescription would lead back to a secret buried for 10 years. 2 hours earlier, rain had already swallowed most of the city. Water rolled down apartment windows, pooled in cracked sidewalks, and turned the neon lights outside Franklin Pharmacy into blurred streaks of red and blue. 8-year-old Maya Brooks stood under the pharmacy awning for several seconds before gathering enough courage to step inside. Her red dress, once bright, had faded from too many washes. The hem was uneven. One sleeve had been repaired with white thread that didn't quite match. She held a folded prescription in one hand and 3 crumpled dollar bills in the other. The pharmacy smelled like disinfectant and wet umbrellas. A television mounted near the ceiling played a late-night weather report that nobody was watching. Somewhere in the back, a refrigerator hummed steadily. Maya approached the counter slowly. Every step seemed deliberate, as though she had rehearsed this moment all the way across town. Harold Pike, the pharmacist on duty, barely looked up from his computer. Next, Maya placed the prescription down. Then the money. Then a small pile of quarters and nickels she had counted 3 times on the walk over. "Sir," she said quietly, "can $3 buy one pill?" Harold frowned. "One pill?" Maya nodded. "Just one." That made him finally look at her. Really look. Rainwater dripped from her braids onto the floor. Her sneakers were damp. Her hands were trembling, though she kept them folded neatly in front of her. "Medicine doesn't work like that," Harold replied. "What is this for?" Maya pointed to the prescription. "My mom." Harold picked up the paper. His expression changed slightly as he scanned it. Not softer, just more serious. Maya watched his eyes move across the page. "She's sick?" he asked. Maya swallowed. "She's sleeping." It wasn't exactly an answer. Harold noticed that. So did the man waiting behind her in line. Nathan Whitmore had stopped looking at his phone several moments ago. He was a familiar face in magazines and business journals, though Maya had no reason to recognize him. To her, he was simply another adult in an expensive suit standing beneath bright lights while she counted coins. Nathan's attention drifted toward the prescription. Not intentionally at first. Then he noticed a phrase typed beneath the medication name. Emergency fever protocol. Something tightened in his chest. Strange. Familiar. Unwelcome. He couldn't immediately place why. At the same moment, Harold finished reading and slowly lowered the paper. His eyes lingered on the prescription longer than they should have. Maya sensed it immediately. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Harold didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned the paper over and stared at a small handwritten note near the bottom. The note had been smudged by rain, but one word remained perfectly clear. A single name. Lily. The name sat on the paper like a drop of ink that refused to spread. Lily. Harold's eyes lingered on it for another second before he flipped the prescription back over and cleared his throat. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Maya immediately reached for the paper, but Harold kept one finger resting on the corner. Not aggressively, just enough to remind everyone who controlled the counter. "My mom's doctor wrote it," Maya said. "This morning." Harold studied her face. "And your mother couldn't come herself?" Maya's gaze dropped briefly to the wet floor. She tried to get out of bed. Something about the way she said it made the answer feel heavier than the words themselves. Harold finally released the prescription and turned toward his computer. The clicking of keys filled the silence. Behind Maya, Nathan Whitmore remained where he was. Most people would have left. Most people would have offered a few dollars and walked away feeling generous. Nathan did neither. He simply watched. The television above the shelves switched from weather updates to a local news segment. A smiling anchor talked about holiday charity drives, while rain continued tapping against the front windows. Harold stared at the screen for a moment, then back at his monitor. "The medication costs $26.40, he said. Maya nodded once as if she had expected that answer. Then she carefully began counting her coins again. Quarter, quarter, dime, nickel, quarter. Her fingers moved with the concentration of someone solving a difficult math problem. Nathan glanced at the prescription once more. Emergency fever protocol. The phrase kept bothering him. He had seen it somewhere before. Not recently. Years ago. Before he could place it, his phone vibrated softly in his pocket. A message from his assistant about a board meeting scheduled for the next morning. Nathan ignored it. Instead, he opened his camera and, pretending to check a notification, discreetly took a photograph of the prescription resting on the counter. He wasn't entirely sure why. The action felt irrational. Yet something inside him insisted he might need it later. Harold finished typing and folded his arms. $3 won't even cover the dispensing fee. Maya's shoulders stiffened. What if I only take one pill? Harold shook his head. That's not how prescriptions work. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Maya reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a folded receipt. The paper was worn nearly white along the creases. Last month it was $12, she said quietly. Harold took the receipt. His expression changed for only a fraction of a second. That was a different prescription. Maya pointed immediately. Same medicine. Nathan noticed the pharmacist hesitate. Tiny. Almost invisible. But it was there. The kind of hesitation that appears when someone realizes a child has noticed something adults hoped would go unnoticed. Harold handed the receipt back. Prices change. Maya accepted the answer without arguing. Yet she carefully returned the receipt to her pocket instead of throwing it away, as though she already knew it mattered. Nathan's phone vibrated again. This time he opened the photograph he had taken. Zooming in, he examined the lower corner of the prescription. Most of the handwriting had been blurred by rainwater. Most of it. Not all. Beneath the name Lily was a second note written in faint blue ink. 3 words. Small enough that Harold hadn't seemed to notice them, or perhaps had pretended not to notice. Nathan felt a chill move slowly through his chest as he read them. Previous case file. Nathan read the words again, not moving his thumb from the screen. Previous case file. The phrase should have meant nothing in a corner pharmacy on a rainy night, beside a child with wet braids and $3 in coins. But it did. It meant paperwork. It meant archives. It meant someone had connected this prescription to something older and had not wanted to say it out loud. Harold noticed Nathan looking at his phone and immediately turned the prescription face down. "Sir," he said, his voice suddenly more polished. "I can help you in just a moment." Nathan looked up slowly. "Take your time." The calmness in his voice made Harold blink. Maya watched both men carefully. Children who grew up around unpaid bills learned how adults sounded when they were pretending everything was normal. Harold reached for the receipt again. "Let me see that old one." Maya stepped back half an inch. "Not much. Just enough." "Why?" Harold forced a smile. "So I can check the price difference." Maya did not hand it over. "You already said prices change." For the first time, Harold seemed unsure what to do with her. Nathan almost smiled, but the expression never reached his mouth. Instead, he asked gently, "Maya, did your mother tell you to keep that receipt?" She nodded. "She said if grown-ups changed the story, keep the paper from before." Harold's jaw tightened. It was brief, but Nathan saw it. He had spent 30 years reading rooms where men lied with better suits and cleaner hands. The pharmacy was quiet except for the rain against the glass and the dull hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Somewhere near the register, a small plastic spoon tapped against an empty coffee cup when Harold shifted his elbow too fast. He reached for his phone, glanced at the screen, then turned it face down. Nathan's eyes dropped to it. One message notification had flashed before the screen went dark. Only 2 words were visible. "Not tonight." Maya saw it too. Her gaze moved from the phone to Harold's face, then back to the prescription. "That's the voice," she whispered. Nathan turned slightly. "What voice?" Maya swallowed. She had not meant to say it out loud. Harold spoke quickly. "Children hear all kinds of things when they're scared." Nathan did not look at him. "Maya." The little girl pressed one hand into the pocket of her red dress, feeling for the receipt like it was a stone that could keep her standing. "When my mom called about her paycheck," she said, "a man told her not to come back asking questions. He said people like her should be grateful for any work at all." Harold gave a short laugh, too dry and too fast. "That could have been anyone." Maya looked up at him. "He said grateful the same way you just did." The word seemed to stay in the air longer than it should have. Nathan's face remained controlled, but something behind his eyes shifted. He slipped his phone back into his coat pocket and quietly said, "Do not throw anything away." Harold stared. "Excuse me?" Nathan's voice stayed low. "The prescription, the receipt, the computer entry, all of it." Maya slowly pulled out the old receipt again, but this time she unfolded the bottom corner Nathan had not seen before. Beneath the printed pharmacy address was the same patient reference number written on tonight's prescription. The matching reference number erased any remaining chance of coincidence. Harold's expression flattened. Not angry, not surprised, just careful. The way people looked when they realized a conversation had become dangerous. "That doesn't prove anything," he said. "Reference numbers get reused all the time." Maya immediately shook her head. "Mom said they don't." Nathan noticed she answered before even thinking about it. Not because she wanted to argue, but because she had heard the explanation before. Many times. Harold opened his mouth again, but Nathan's phone rang. The caller ID showed a name he normally answered immediately. Evelien Hart, Chief Legal Counsel for Whitmore Health. Nathan stepped a few feet away and picked up. 10 minutes later, Maya found herself sitting in the back seat of a black sedan that smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. Rain streaked across the windows as the city lights blurred into gold and white smears. Nathan had not promised to solve anything. He had only said he wanted to ask a few questions somewhere quieter. Yet by the time they arrived, the destination wasn't a small office or a coffee shop. It was Whitmore Tower. 43 floors of glass, steel, and polished stone rising above the city like a monument to certainty. Maya felt small the moment she stepped into the lobby. Marble floors reflected crystal lights overhead. Security guards stood near elevators. Men and women in tailored suits crossed the room carrying tablets and coffee cups that probably cost more than her entire outfit. The receptionist looked at Maya's wet dress before looking at Nathan. Only for a second. But Maya noticed. Children always noticed. Evelyn Hart was waiting near the elevators. Elegant gray suit. Perfect posture. Calm eyes. She smiled politely at Maya. The kind of smile that never quite reached the heart. "Nathan," she said, "I understand there was an unusual incident." "Possibly," Nathan replied. Evelyn's attention moved to Maya. "And this must be the young lady." Maya nodded. "Hello." "Hello, Maya." Evelyn crouched slightly so they were eye level. Her voice remained pleasant. "I know tonight feels important, but adults sometimes connect details that aren't actually connected. It happens more often than you think." Maya said nothing. Evelyn continued. "A matching number on a receipt doesn't necessarily mean anyone did something wrong. Still polite, still reasonable. Yet somehow the words made Maya feel as though she were shrinking inside her chair. Upstairs, in a private conference room overlooking the rain-soaked city, the difference between their worlds felt even larger. A long walnut table, floor-to-ceiling windows, bottled water lined up with military precision. Nathan sat at one end. Maya sat alone at the other. The distance between them felt longer than the table itself. Evelyn reviewed copies of the prescription and receipt. Another executive joined briefly by video call. Then a compliance director. Then a payroll consultant. One by one, adults with impressive titles explained why paperwork could be misleading. Why database errors happened. Why old records sometimes appeared connected when they were not. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody insulted Maya. Yet every explanation seemed designed to make her smaller, to turn certainty into confusion. Nathan listened carefully. He did not fully agree, but neither did he interrupt. The city glowed outside the glass while rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally, Evelyn folded her hands. Maya, do you know what confirmation bias is? Maya shook her head. It's when people see what they expect to see. Maya looked down at the receipt in her hands. Then she looked back up. Do grown-ups ever do that? The room became quiet. One executive cleared his throat. Another looked toward the windows. Evelyn smiled again. This time it took longer. Sometimes. Maya nodded. Then she carefully slid the receipt across the table. Then maybe somebody expected my mom not to matter. Nobody answered immediately. Nathan's gaze stayed on the receipt, on the water stain near the bottom corner, on the reference number. Then his eyes moved slightly lower, a detail everyone else had missed. Printed beneath the number was a tiny timestamp. The receipt had been generated at 11:42 p.m. on a night when, according to the payroll records Evelyn had just shown them, Maya's mother was supposedly no longer employed. The timestamp sat quietly beneath the reference number, yet it changed the temperature of the room. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Rain continued sliding down the glass behind them. Somewhere far below, a siren passed through the city and faded away. Evelyn adjusted the papers in front of her. Payroll records can contain delays, she said carefully. That doesn't necessarily mean the employment date is incorrect. Her tone remained calm, professional, impossible to criticize. But Nathan noticed something else. She did not look directly at the timestamp while speaking. She looked at him, as if she already knew where the conversation could lead. Maya folded her hands in her lap. She had stopped trying to convince anyone. Instead, she watched. Children who spent years around worried adults learned when silence carried more weight than words. Can I go home now? She asked softly. Nathan turned toward her. Your mother is alone? Maya nodded. She doesn't like waking up by herself when she's sick. The answer landed harder than she intended. Nathan rose from his chair. We'll take you home. 25 minutes later, the city looked different. The glass towers were gone. So were the polished floors and conference tables. The sedan rolled into a neighborhood where streetlights flickered and old apartment buildings leaned against years of weather and neglect. Maya directed the driver through narrow streets until they stopped outside a worn brick building with peeling paint near the entrance. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. Somewhere upstairs, a television played too loudly. A washing machine thumped behind a closed door. Maya hurried ahead. Nathan followed more slowly. The apartment was small. One lamp glowed near the couch. A bowl sat untouched on the kitchen table. Beside it rested a glass of water and 2 unopened packets of crackers. Evidence of someone who had planned to eat and never managed it. Elena Brooks lay asleep in the bedroom, her breathing shallow but steady. Nathan remained near the doorway. He had entered thousands of hospital rooms, boardrooms, charity galas, and private estates. Yet standing inside that apartment felt strangely uncomfortable. Not because of poverty, because of dignity. Everything was clean. Everything was organized. The struggle was visible, but so was the effort. Maya walked directly to an old metal lockbox beneath a side table. She knelt, unlocked it with a small key she wore around her neck, and removed something wrapped carefully in a faded dish towel. Nathan watched without speaking. Maya held the bundle against her chest for a moment. Then she carried it to the kitchen table. Mom said this isn't for anybody else, she said. Only if something happened. She slowly unfolded the towel. Inside was an old flip phone. The plastic casing was scratched. The battery cover had been taped together twice. It looked completely ordinary. Yet Maya handled it the way someone handles a family photograph. It doesn't work anymore, she said. But she never threw it away. Nathan sat down. The kitchen light cast long shadows across the table. Maya opened the phone. The screen remained black, dead for years. Then she removed a folded piece of paper, hidden beneath the battery compartment. This was inside. Nathan accepted it carefully. The paper contained only a handful of handwritten notes. Dates, times, a few names, one phone number, and a single sentence written at the bottom in hurried blue ink. Nathan's eyes stopped moving. For a long moment he simply stared, because he recognized the handwriting. Not perfectly, not immediately, but enough. He had seen it before on internal reports years ago. Reports that had crossed his desk during the months after his daughter died. Maya noticed the change in his face. "Do you know something?" she asked. Nathan didn't answer right away. His gaze had moved to the name written beside the phone number. A name he trusted. A name that had worked beside him for nearly a decade. Evelien Hart. The name seemed impossible to belong on that piece of paper. Nathan read it once. Then again. Evelien Hart. Outside, rain tapped softly against the apartment window. Inside, the refrigerator motor hummed for a few seconds before falling silent. Maya watched him carefully. "Is that bad?" she asked. Nathan folded the note and slid it back onto the table. His face revealed nothing. Years in boardrooms had taught him how to hide surprise better than most people hid ordinary thoughts. "I don't know yet," he said quietly. It wasn't a lie. It was simply no longer the whole truth. Elena shifted slightly in the bedroom. Maya immediately stood and checked on her. She adjusted the blanket around her mother's shoulders, then returned. Nathan noticed she never once asked how much money he had. Never once asked for help. Most adults would have. The realization bothered him more than it should have. "What do you want to happen?" he asked. Maya frowned as though the answer were obvious. "I want my mom to stop being scared when the phone rings." Nathan looked down. "Anything else?" Maya thought for a moment. The people who worked with her should get paid too. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "And if somebody lied, they should stop lying. No demand for money. No request for favors. Just that." The simplicity of it left Nathan strangely unsettled. 20 minutes later, after arranging for a physician he trusted to quietly visit Elena first thing in the morning, Nathan stepped into the hallway and made 3 calls. The first was to a private forensic accountant. The second was to the head of internal records compliance. The third was not answered. He listened to the voicemail greeting twice before hanging up. Evelyn Hart's voice sounded exactly as it always had. Calm, precise, professional. Yet now he found himself listening for things he had never questioned before. Back inside the apartment, Maya sat at the kitchen table sorting papers from the lockbox. Hospital bills, utility notices, payroll statements, each one carefully folded, each one saved. Nathan watched her line them up by date. "Why keep all of these?" he asked. Maya shrugged. "Mom says papers remember things when people don't." The answer lingered in the room. Near midnight, the physician arrived quietly. While he examined Elena, Nathan sat alone beneath the kitchen light reviewing photographs he had requested from company archives. Employment records, contractor agreements, vendor reports. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. Yet a pattern slowly emerged. The contractor responsible for payroll disputes appeared repeatedly beside one approving signature. Not Evelyn's, someone else's. Nathan leaned back. The discovery should have relieved him. Instead, it made him more uneasy, because the signature belonged to Daniel Mercer, his longtime operations director, a man Nathan had trusted for 11 years, a man who had attended his daughter's funeral, a man who had stood beside him through every expansion of Whitmore. Health. Nathan's phone vibrated. A secure file had arrived from records compliance. Subject line, archived security request. He opened it. Inside was a report connected to an incident from 10 years earlier. Most of the attached files were intact. Access logs, visitor records, staff schedules. But one item stood out immediately. Security footage from a hospital corridor had been preserved except for a missing segment. Exactly 7 minutes. Nathan stared at the screen. 7 minutes during the same night his daughter died. 7 minutes that someone had intentionally removed. His eyes drifted slowly to Daniel Mercer's name on the authorization record. For the first time in years, Nathan realized he might not have misunderstood a situation. He might have misunderstood a person. The missing 7 minutes refused to leave Nathan's mind. He stared at the authorization record until the words blurred together. Daniel Mercer. Approved deletion. 10 years ago, he would have dismissed it as routine administrative work. Tonight, he could not. By sunrise, rain had finally stopped. Pale gray light filtered through the apartment window. The physician's report was reassuring. Elena would recover if she received proper treatment and rest. Maya listened carefully, then thanked the doctor before asking only one question. Will she be scared when she wakes up? The physician paused. Not today. Maya nodded. That seemed to matter more than anything else. Later that morning, Nathan returned to Whitmore Tower. He did not call a meeting. He did not make accusations. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He asked questions. Quiet ones. The kind people answer before realizing they should be careful. By noon, Daniel Mercer sat across from him in a private conference room. The city stretched behind them through floor-to-ceiling glass. A tray with untouched coffee sat between them. Steam no longer rose from the cups. Daniel looked exactly as he always had. Confident, controlled, loyal. You wanted to discuss old hospital records? Daniel asked. Nathan nodded. A routine archive review. Daniel relaxed slightly. Nathan noticed. The conversation drifted through staffing procedures. Vendor audits, compliance protocols. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. Then Nathan casually slid a photocopy across the table. Not the missing footage report. Not yet. Just the payroll receipt Maya had protected. Daniel glanced down. What is this? A former contractor dispute. Daniel barely looked at it before pushing it back. Human Resources handles those. Nathan said nothing. Silence stretched longer than comfort allowed. Finally, Daniel took another look. The tiny timestamp caught his eye. For the first time, he hesitated. Small. Nearly invisible. Nathan saw it anyway. Meanwhile, 2 floors below, Maya sat quietly in a waiting area beside Nathan's assistant, Claire. Employees walked past carrying folders and laptops. Some smiled politely. Others barely noticed her. Maya held the old flip phone in both hands. She had brought it herself despite everyone suggesting she leave it somewhere safe. Your mom really kept all those papers? Claire asked gently. Maya nodded. She said people forget things when they're afraid. Claire smiled sadly. She sounds smart. Maya looked down at the phone. She is. Then she frowned. Something had caught her attention. Under the battery compartment, beneath the folded note, another piece of paper appeared slightly loose. Tiny. Almost hidden. She carefully pulled it free. Upstairs, Nathan finally asked the question he had prepared all morning. Do you remember authorizing security edits after Lily's death? Daniel's fingers stopped moving. The conference room became very still. A phone vibrated somewhere on the table. Neither man touched it. Daniel leaned back. That was a long time ago. Do you remember? Nathan repeated. Daniel smiled faintly. Not specifically. Nathan nodded as though satisfied. Then he placed another document on the table. A visitor access log. Daniel glanced at it. What am I looking at? Nothing important, Nathan said calmly. Just trying to understand why a cleaning employee appears in the corridor records after her shift ended. Daniel's eyes moved again. This time his smile disappeared for half a second. Downstairs, Maya unfolded the hidden paper. It wasn't a note. It was a tiny printed photograph, faded with age. 3 people stood in a hospital hallway. One was Elena. One was a nurse. The third person's face had been partially cut off by the edge of the picture. Yet enough remained visible to identify him. Maya stared. Then she stood up immediately. At that exact moment upstairs, Daniel reached for the conference room door. His hand stopped on the handle when Nathan spoke without raising his voice. One more thing. Daniel turned. Nathan slid the faded photograph across the table. The same photograph Maya had just brought upstairs. Daniel looked down. For the first time since entering the room, all color drained from his face. And in that moment, he finally understood the little girl was no longer standing alone. Daniel stared at the photograph for several long seconds. The room remained silent except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. Outside the glass walls, employees moved through their day unaware that something old and buried had just begun to surface. "Where did you get this?" Daniel finally asked. Nathan didn't answer. The question itself was answer enough. Daniel knew exactly why the photograph mattered. For the first time, Nathan saw fear. Not panic. Not guilt. Fear. Small. Controlled. Real. Before either man could speak again, the conference room door opened. Claire entered with Maya standing beside her. The little girl looked impossibly small against the polished wood, the skyline, the expensive suits. Yet she walked directly to the table. In her hands was the old flip phone. Daniel's eyes immediately dropped to it. Maya noticed. So did Nathan. "There's something else," Maya said softly. Nathan looked at her. "What is it?" Maya carefully opened the phone again. Beneath the photograph had been a second hidden compartment. Tiny. Easy to miss. Her mother had taped a memory card inside years ago. Nobody had known it was there. Not even Maya until that morning. The card had already been examined by Nathan's technology team. Now a laptop sat open on the conference table. One file. No title. No date. Just raw footage recovered from damaged storage. Nobody rushed to press play. The still image alone was enough to tighten the air in the room. A hospital corridor. 10 years old. Nathan sat down slowly. Daniel remained standing. Maya moved closer to the table but kept one hand resting on the phone, as if she were protecting it. The video began. Grainy security footage appeared on the screen. The timestamp matched the night Nathan's daughter, Lily, had died. A nurse crossed the hallway. Then another employee. Then Elena Brooks entered carrying cleaning supplies. She paused outside a patient room. Nathan leaned forward. The footage had no sound. Yet every movement felt unbearably loud.
Elena Knokid
Waited. Then entered. 43 seconds later, she rushed back into the hallway. Not walking. Running. She flagged down a passing staff member. The staff member ignored her. Elena followed. Tried again. The footage continued. Nathan's hands slowly tightened together. He had spent 10 years believing nobody noticed. Nobody acted. Nobody tried. Yet there she was. Running. Pointing. Pleading. Then the screen showed something else. Someone entering the corridor. Daniel Mercer. Younger. 10 years younger. He spoke briefly with Elena. She pointed toward Lily's room. Daniel looked. Then toward a security camera mounted overhead. The footage skipped. 7 missing minutes. The screen jumped forward. Elena was gone. Daniel remained. Nathan stopped breathing. The technology specialist sitting near the wall quietly opened a second file recovered from the memory card. Audio. Distorted. Incomplete. But usable. A woman's voice filled the room. Elena's voice. "The child isn't responding. Somebody needs to check her." Another voice answered. Male. Calm. Familiar. "This isn't your responsibility." Silence. Then Elena again. More urgent. "A doctor needs to see her now." The male voice returned. "You didn't see anything. Do you understand?" Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nathan felt something inside him break with terrifying quietness. Not because of what Daniel had done. Because of what Nathan himself had failed to see. A woman had tried to help his daughter. A woman whose wages were later stolen under his company's name. A woman whose child had stood in a pharmacy with $3 while he lived. Surrounded by resources, Maya lowered her eyes. She suddenly understood why Nathan looked different. Not angry. Worse. Hurt. Daniel finally spoke. "Nathan, there are explanations." Nathan looked at him. For a moment he could not speak at all. Then he reached forward, closed the laptop, and placed the old memory card gently on the table between them. His voice, when it came, was calm enough to chill the room. "Call my attorney." The room remained silent long after Nathan spoke. No one argued. No one raised a voice. The memory card sat in the center of the conference table, smaller than a postage stamp, yet heavier than every legal document Nathan had signed that year. By the end of the week, the consequences began quietly. Daniel Mercer was removed from his position pending a formal investigation. The board authorized an independent review of payroll practices, archived hospital records, and contractor agreements connected to the missing wages. Attorneys became involved. Compliance officers interviewed former employees. The contractor responsible for withholding paychecks lost its contract and became the subject of multiple inquiries. None of it happened overnight. None of it was dramatic. But for the first time in years, the machinery of power was moving in the direction of truth instead of away from it. Elena Brooks woke 3 days later in a hospital room that smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic. Morning sunlight stretched across the blanket. For a moment she looked confused. Then she saw Maya asleep in a chair beside the bed with the old flip phone resting in her lap. Elena's eyes filled with tears immediately. Not because of the hospital, because Maya was safe. When Nathan visited later that afternoon, Elena tried to apologize. "I never wanted trouble," she said softly. Nathan stood beside the window for several seconds before answering. "You tried to save my daughter." Elena lowered her eyes. "I tried." Nathan swallowed. The words cost him more than anyone in the room realized. "And I never knew." There was no speech after that. No grand declaration. Just silence shared by two people carrying very different kinds of grief. Over the following months, things changed. Back pay was issued not only to Elena but to dozens of workers whose complaints had been ignored. Legal protections were arranged so employees could report misconduct without fear. Medical bills that had been crushing Elena for years were resolved through proper assistance programs and legal advocacy. Maya received something she had never expected. Stability. Not luxury. Stability. Her school tuition was covered through a scholarship fund established for children of essential workers. Her apartment building received long overdue repairs after housing attorneys became involved. The refrigerator stayed full. The lights stayed on. The phone stopped ringing with threats. One evening near the start of spring, Nathan arrived at the apartment carrying a paper bag from a neighborhood diner. The rain was gone. The windows were open. Somewhere outside, children laughed on the sidewalk. Elena was sitting at the kitchen table. Healthier now. Stronger. Maya helped set out bowls while Nathan unpacked containers of soup and fresh bread. Nothing about the meal looked important. Yet it felt more meaningful than many charity galas Nathan had attended over the years. The old flip phone still sat on a shelf near the kitchen. Not hidden anymore. Preserved. A reminder. Halfway through dinner, Maya stood up and disappeared into her room. She returned carrying a framed photograph. The same old hospital picture, this time restored, cleaned, enlarged. Elena placed it carefully on the shelf beside the phone. Nathan stared at it for a long moment. Then Maya looked at him. "My mom said you thought nobody cared." Nathan smiled sadly. "I did." Maya nodded. Children often accepted truths adults spent years resisting. She cared. Nathan looked toward Elena, then toward the photograph, then toward the old phone that had survived long enough to tell the truth. For several seconds, he could not find words. Finally, Maya pushed a full glass of milk across the table toward him. "You missed it the first time," she said gently. "But you listened this time." Nathan lowered his eyes, and for the first time in many years, the silence that followed did not feel empty. Felt earned. Because power had not won. Money had not won. The truth had. And the people nobody listened to had finally been heard.